It's the Blues Rock Show with Pete Francis and Willie Witten.
Welcome to the Blues Rock Show. I'm Pete Francis, joined by Willie Witten. Today, our special guest, Phillip-Michael Scales. He's got an album coming out this week on Friday, Sinner-Songwriter.
Yes,
Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, you got the promotion down. So Sinner-Songwriter, it's a really cool title. Tell us about that title and how you came up with it.
So I had a Sinner-Songwriter EP to begin with, and I really liked the concept of it, but I always knew I wanted to flesh it out into an album. So what I kind of did with it was like, I guess in order to talk about the title, I kind of have to talk about what I call dive bar soul, which is a genre I made up about my own music. And so it kind of came as a reaction to almost a return to the blues, right? So my aunt was really good friends with B.B. King since before I was born, and so I always grew up calling him my uncle. He always he always called me his nephew. And so when I was young and getting into music, I knew there was no way I was going to be that guitar slinger. So I just kind of went the other direction and went like straight into indie rock and like, you know, all sorts of songwriting based rock music. And you know, as the years went on and he and I got closer, you know, he eventually passed away. And so I feel like the dive bar soul thing is like a little bit of honoring that blues stuff and a little bit of honoring being like, all right, I can put some of that stuff in there now. And I think also too, it's largely just the idea that when you're young, the blues has a lot of gravity. You know what I mean? And as a kid, it's kind of lost on you. Like the guitar part's cool and like, you know, the notes are cool, but like you don't really, you know, get it, you know? And so I felt like Dive Bar Soul ended up being that indie rock storytelling songwriting plus that passion of the blues. So when you get to Sinner-Songwriter, it's kind of like a bit of that like, you know, I think there's always like that sinner's prayer and Lord, if I done wrong, and sort of like these religious connotations that kind of came into blues as sort of a, you know, continuation from gospel, right? Of those spirituals back in the day. So for me, Sinner-Songwriter kind of marries that singer-songwriter world that I was in also with this bluesy world. And, you know, also, you know, sometimes it takes a couple sins to make a couple songs. So there you go.
So, Phillip-Michael, you're taking our questions right out of our mouths. The thing that I was going to immediately ask next.
Yeah, he answered like three of the questions we were going to ask.
Bam!
But, well, I think that shows a lot that you understand this is a focused effort. You're not someone who's just out there throwing stuff. This is a focused effort. What I was going to ask is, because listening to the album, it's not just the title Sinner-Songwriter. Throughout the album, lyrically, there's a lot of talk about sin and redemption. And then also musically, one of the things that struck me is just the lushness and the color of the backing vocals. And so, yeah, what came through to me was not just the blues, but I felt like I just kept hearing gospel. Like, is that something you grew up with, or is that something you got into later?
I think soul and gospel was kind of always around. You know, I grew up in Metro Detroit, so my mother was like, mother and her two sisters, like they went to the Motown Review back in like, you know, the 60s, where it was just like Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder and Gladys Knight and like Aretha Franklin for like $5, and you just like bring lunch and like post up, and you're like, what? This is incredible. So I feel like that music was always sort of around. But you know, I think the Dive Bar Soul kind of covers like a bit of gospel and a bit of that. One of my friends, Kristen Brooks, she is a very talented singer, and she actually sings with Sam Smith. And so she's in his touring band, and she and I went to college together. And I was like, man, I would love some like Sam Smith-esque backup vocals. And I was like kind of messing around with them for a little bit. And then I was like, wait, why don't I just call Kristen and have her, you know, hop on this track? So I think a lot of that sort of gospel flavor is definitely assisted by her.
At what age did you say, I want to be a musician?
Man, you know, I don't know. When I was 9 years old, I was in Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat with Donny Osmond. And it was a 2-for-1 deal because my mom, my older sister actually got in the choir. And my mom we're like 2 years apart. My mom was like, listen, if she's going to do this, like he's going to do this. I know he's technically too young, but like I promise you, I am not going to cart around two children or one child, one place, and one child, to a huge Broadway musical, whatever. So I snuck in, and I think that was like my first taste of performing, and it was like in front of like 5,000 people a night or something crazy like that. And like I was 9, so it was like, oh, this is just what I want to do. So I guess like to me, it was always sort of on the table, and it was always sort of possible. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I got my first guitar and started like playing and writing songs around like 13 or so. I think I got lessons at 13. But yeah, that was kind of, where my musical journey started.
So when you talk about that, what pops out to me is age 9, 5,000 people.
Sure.
So stage fright. Do you ever get it still? Because it sounds like you're not afraid, that fear is not really in you. You knew this is what you want to do. Or are there times where sometimes you still get the butterflies?
I think that for me, preparation is always sort of the key. I think I was a stronger performer than I was a songwriter or guitar player or singer for a long time. And I think that kind of carried me through, some of those early years. And so I'm very comfortable on stage. I think what it comes down to for me is not necessarily stage fright, but it's like being prepared for what I'm doing at that moment. Once a show is down, like, I'm pretty good, I mean, every now and then, you get somebody from a label or somebody from, important in the audience or something like that. But as long as there are people there, I don't really get nervous, if that makes sense. It's weird. It's like the people are sort of my comfort. So if you're a musician out there and you would like a tip, I usually try to find like a nice, friendly face in the audience. Sometimes you'll find like, woman who might be like in her 50s or something and is giving you those mom vibes, who's just sort of like, good job, I'm here for you. And so you kind of like anchor with her, and then maybe you veer off, and if it gets a little scary, you anchor right back. And just from that kind of helps out mitigate getting into your head too much.
You mentioned that connection with BB King, and obviously BB King, everyone knows, the king of the blues. Sure. You didn't really go to the blues, though, right away. So what kind of caused you to go the direction that you went and started out making music?
The direction that I started out, or the direction where I ended up?
Both.
From where you started and then going to implementing blues into your music?
Well, sort of as I said a little bit earlier, I think that it was intimidating to sort of go there. And I think I also didn't have like the breadth of experience to sort of be able to dive into the blues in sort of that way. And authenticity is really big to me, so I'm really glad and grateful that I was able to sort of get my songwriting chops. And he always said, I want you to be a musician, I don't want you to be a blues man or a rock and roll guy, like be a musician, just sort of all encompassing. And he actually encouraged me to go to Berkeley out in Boston. So I did that, and then I think the return I think it's just like the political climate. I think that it's sort of like it's black music. It's a lot of people think of black music nowadays as sort of like R&B or hip hop. And so I think that exactly. That gorgeous wall of art, and I love all those records that you have behind you. Shout out to Jay-Z, but. I think that more specifically than that, like, there's blues, there's funk, there's, rock and roll, there's all sorts of other things. So sort of coming back into that and having the sort of racial component of the blues and having the political component of the blues, and just having had, my heart destroyed, a couple times, I think those experiences sort of led me back into it. But I always love a challenge. And so getting back into blues guitar and sort of learning a little bit more about it has always been sort of on my list of things to do. And so now I'm finally challenging myself to throw in a little bit more solos and throw in a little bit more licks.
What would you say is the biggest lesson that you learned from BB King?
Well, he told me to stick with it, and at first I was like, what is that? Cool. Great. All right. Stick with it. But like, after you've been, you've moved to a different city and no one cares about your music and you're not making any money off your music and you want to give up, like stick with it starts to like, oh, okay. Really, really start to take hold. And I was talking to my best friend the other day. He's in a awesome band called San Gabriel. It's like this dream pop electro stuff. He was saying, it's so cool because we talked almost every day since college, or every couple days. And he was saying, if you had quit 2 years ago, because I think, recently I've had a bit of a moment. I got signed to a record label. I won a couple competitions. I'm going on tour in France. I'm doing a bunch of stuff. He's like, if you had quit 2 years ago, everybody else would have said like, well, music's hard. I met Philip, and he's a really good musician, but I don't know, music business is hard. And so I think that stick with it kind of really, that's really a testament to stick with it. If I'm honest,
Pete wanted to ask a question about your label. Pete brought it up to me. I thought it was interesting too. Pete, this was your big question. I want you to throw it out there.
Well, yeah. So your label is based out of France.
Yeah.
So how do you get connected with them, and how do you end up going over there?
So I was playing a festival out in Cognac, France. And so it's like a blues passion festival. And do you guys know J.C. Brooks and the Uptown Sound, Chicago band?
Heard of them, don't know a ton of their stuff, only a name.
Great band, but their agent reached out, and so I ended up, going over there and playing a show. That was 2018, maybe, summer of 2018, and then didn't hear very much back from it. Was trying to get back, but who knows. And then probably I don't know, maybe November of last year during the pandemic, I get an email, and I guess somebody had told somebody, and all of a sudden, this label's like, hey, we're a classic blues label, but we've just bought the label, and we're looking to sort of expand the idea of the blues. And so as a result, they thought I'd be a pretty decent candidate. So, that's how it worked out. And so last week I went there for the first time to see them. I've been to France before, but it was the first time I kind of got to hang out. So we did a big press run and some dinners, and they're lovely, amazing people. And I've got a lot of confidence in this record.
That's awesome. Phillip-Michael, I got to ask, speaking in that sort of term, label and business side of it, unless
Sure.
I'm mistaken, and I might be, but I think you got an album release party coming up sometime soon.
I do.
It's Wednesday, right?
It's Wednesday at the Golden Dagger in Chicago, and then Friday at the 20 Front Street in Michigan, and then November 5th in Nashville, Tennessee at the Original Basement.
So you've got the album release parties. There's a lot to be proud of on this album. There really is.
Thanks, man.
Short to medium term, after that, what's next for Phillip-Michael Scales? What happens now?
Somebody once told me if you can't get Muhammad to the mountain, you've got to bring the mountain to Muhammad. So I'm going to be on the road as much as possible for the next probably year or so. Got the Rock Boat coming up in November, which is a huge honor to be selected for. Going to be back in France in probably the spring and summer. And so, yeah, just lots of dates, and hoping that, I can let more people know about Dive Bar Soul and let more people know about who I am.
Awesome. Well, the new album is Sinner-Songwriter. It comes out October 29th. Any final thoughts before we let you go?
Buy my album.
It's a good
Direct.
thought. Buy it.
I like it.
Just buy it. It's a good record. It's a solid record. Where is it? Where'd it go? Here it is. Ladies and gentlemen, Sinner-Songwriter is going to be out on October 29th.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Phillip-Michael Scales. Well, thanks so much for coming on the
Thanks,
show
guys.
today. We really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. We'll see you soon.
All right, that's going to wrap up this week's edition of the Blues Rock Show. For Phillip-Michael Scales and Willie Witten, I'm Pete Francis. We'll see you next time.